Dr. Jessica Drummond, it is such a pleasure to get to see your beautiful face. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. Great to see your beautiful face, Dr. Mariza. Good to always hang out.
Yeah, well, I want to just kind of set the stage for why I reached out. One, I just deeply adore you. We are, in a lot of ways, on this a very similar path, and we are showing up for women in perimenopause and midlife, or particularly in midlife, and helping them navigate the challenges that arise during this transition. And more importantly, I love the work that you're doing because it's very clear that in perimenopause, we lose our protective armor
Mm.
and that things start to present, or all of a sudden we become more susceptible to, chronic illnesses and chronic infections. And it just kind of becomes really the messy middle. But why I really reached out was that I saw that you had an extended vacation in Europe and the insights that you had walked away with. Because I know that you are so great about tracking your data, particularly about because of your own journey. And I'd love for you to share a little context in that. And that I feel like the insight that you had about the data of your body being in Europe versus here in the US was pretty insightful and eye-opening. And I was like, tell me more, but tell me more on the podcast. Like, I want everyone to hear this. And yeah, I found it really fascinating and interesting. And I find it as a mom and even as a woman in perimenopause, navigating this world, trying to keep my family healthy is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the reason, I wouldn't say necessarily the reason I've been tracking my data for the last 5.5, 6 years is because of my illness, which I'll talk about in a second. Back in 2019 or so, I got an Aura ring. I've always been interested in data-driven healthcare, particularly for chronic illness, because I've been working for the last nearly 30 years, 25 years now in practice, 26 years of working with people with chronic illness as a physical therapist. My doctorate is in clinical nutrition, and I'm a health coach, but primarily I've been educating other health and wellness practitioners, for the better part of the last 16, 17 years. And I've always kept a small practice. And fortunately, I have had a pretty healthy life. I was an athlete my whole life. And I did have, what we termed at the time sort of an adrenal crash after the birth of my first daughter. And so I had some vulnerabilities and susceptibilities, both genetically and just related to being a type A personality. Let's just put it that way. Always very driven, high achieving, athletic, etc. And yet, after that adrenal crash, and once I started to understand the HPA axis and kind of just general lifestyle strategies for maintaining metabolic health, I was fit, I was very active, and when I was 46 years old in 2020, I got COVID. It was pre-vaccination, so I hadn't been vaccinated yet. And I got surprisingly super sick. And I know we talked about this in a lot more detail in your other episodes, so people can refer back to that for a little bit more detail. But bottom line was I wasn't focused on this at all because I was so sick, like kind
You
of
were
life
very
or,
sick. Yeah.
kind of life or death sick for the
Mhm.
first few weeks anyway. And then really, really fatigued, crashed, all the things that we now understand with a lot more research into COVID and long COVID were things like POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or some other version of dysautonomia, MECFS, chronic fatigue, mast cell activation syndrome. I mean, basically, if they've studied anything about long COVID, I had it for at least a little while, and some of the things I still have. So, one of the things that COVID can do, well, COVID is much more common in perimenopausal women. You have about a 45% increased risk of long COVID with any COVID infection. So, I'm always recommending mitigation strategies and N95 well-fitted masking and all of the things you could do, HEPA filters, outdoor activities, et cetera, to lower our risk. But there are also some other risk factors, such as intensity of your life, which a lot of people like me have a pretty intense life, but also genetics, hypermobility genetics, neurodivergent genetics. There's some really interesting things that we're discovering there. But one of the things that COVID can do, and we've also seen some data on COVID or COVID vaccine actually doing this, is trigger people going into menopause early. So for me, having that COVID infection, I was in perimenopause and I was having some hot flashes before then. But other than that, like I wasn't having a lot of symptoms. I wasn't having insomnia. I didn't have any weight gain or anything like that. I wasn't losing my hair. But I did have, hot flashes that were sometimes waking me up at night, which was super annoying.
Yeah,
And
not
so I
fun.
had started doing things like maca, and I was definitely tracking and optimizing my blood sugar, all that kind of stuff. But I was still cycling inconsistently. And we do know that there is some relationship to the age that your mother went into menopause. My mother didn't have a bad at all menopause experience, but it was fairly abrupt for her in the sense that she had variation to her cycle. She had one super heavy bleed when she was like 44 years old, and then her cycle just stopped. So, it's hard to know for sure. But for me, right after COVID, my cycle just stopped. I did have one kind of murky cycle maybe 3 months later, and I thought, well, maybe it's, I'm just healing. There was kind of a shock to the system, but no, it just never returned after that. So, and I wasn't able to talk. I still had terrible hot flashes, In fact, they got a heck of a lot worse with COVID and the dysautonomia that triggered. But, it was the least of my problems at the
Right.
time.
Yeah, it was more of a nuisance than anything. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was whatever estradiol you had left probably had dropped as well. So that kind of co-contributing to those hot flashes.
And I was always kind of low because naturally I was always, let's say, utilizing my HPA access to its
Let's just call it you had
to its
learned how to
limit.
upregulate that stress response system to your advantage for many years.
Yeah, I had been using it at the edge of its effectiveness. And yeah, because of the crash I had, whatever it was like about 15, 20 years before that, I was much better at recovery and nervous system regulation strategies and breath work and yoga and all that kind of thing. But still, my natural tendency was to keep shifting back into high gear.
I always say
So,
it's my oldest standing pattern. It's a
yeah.
default. Like everything's intentional to not default into the stress response system. So I would say every day I'm like, okay, how do we maybe not activate this all the time?
Well, and it's really complicated because I think there's just sort of like how you are
Yeah,
naturally. I
naturally.
think
Yeah.
some people are just sort of driven, but it is a little bit the environment, maybe not even a little bit, maybe a lot more than I give it credit for. The environment of even just safety, achievement, having to run this business. Like there wasn't, especially at that time, like I couldn't just quit. I mean, I
Or
could
stop being a
have.
mom,
Right.
or
I had,
the
yeah,
girls still needed what they needed.
absolutely. I still had children. I was actually the primary breadwinner at the time because my husband's job changed because of COVID and he was in graduate school. So, I think there's capitalistic forces that we also have to consider. And mom doesn't turn off no matter how sick you are. So, or how menopausal you are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and then curious, Jessica, honey, I know that some of my revving up my stress response system, like I've been doing it since I was a teenager, probably sooner than that. Who knows? Like maybe I was always this way. But also I feel like there were adaptations as well. So
Yeah.
there's some type of play in there. But here you are on the back end of a really severe illness now in menopause, but also still having to do the things you do. I'm sure there was some level of adjustment, but in probably some things you maybe couldn't adjust.
100%. I mean, I completely had to change my company. I had to hire someone to essentially run it. I was barely able to work for 2.5, 3 years. I just had to keep the plates spinning, basically. There were many nights where I did not sleep at all because I was in extreme pain. There were months to years where I didn't have the capacity to walk down my street. I was that exhausted and sick. And so I had to keep the roof over our head the best I could. And I think I was successful. And I was lucky enough to have the support of my family, of my parents, of my husband, of people we hired into the business. I had a lot of support. And I, quite frankly, had a reasonable amount of wealth to be able to pay a lot of money to be fully recovered in an experimental environment where almost nothing was sort of like covered by insurance and people didn't know what you could do. So everything I was doing was experimental. But what I decided to do, knowing that, was once I started to understand COVID and long COVID, especially in the context of perimenopause, is and I kind of feel like I'm still in this seat. I decided to become a guinea pig. Like I was going to learn and physically experience, to the level of safety that I felt like I could, all the tools so that I could teach people and help people behind me. Because, as we're seeing now, we still have tens of millions of people with long COVID in this country. And the most common people that have it are women in perimenopause, which is really complicated because sometimes they think it's just perimenopause, which
Right.
also sometimes it is, but often it's both.
It's both. It's a yes and. A lot of all of it. I mean, I think I've shared with you that the first 6 months of perimenopause for me, I thought I had reactivated, like significantly, severely reactivated my stress response system. I'm like, oh, I burned myself out again. And I had known it was familiar. And then I was like, oh, I must have, must be a Hashimoto's flare because there was that too. Like it's all interconnected. And then the back-to-back concussions made it all very blurry. I was like, well, now is this just my brain that's inflamed? What is this? And then on the other side of it, I was like, oh, it's all of it. It's all of this. It's perimenopause too, 100%.
Well, and that's why I educate professionals across disciplines all over the world, because you were all going to be working with women in their 40s to 60s. And as you say, I actually quote you on this lot. Almost none of us arrive here with a clean slate.
Mhm. Yeah.
The reality is, long COVID is an important and increasing problem. And 85% of women in perimenopause also have other chronic illnesses, endometriosis, autoimmune diseases, chronic pain syndromes, PCOS, chronic
Insulin resistant,
concussions.
prediabetes. Yeah.
And so for practitioners, I think we really have to be very, very skilled in this population, that we don't just say HRT is going to solve all of your problems. I am a fan of HRT. I'm a fan of all of the tools we have access to, hormone replacement therapies, every other tool. But not one of them, not nutrition, not exercise, not sleep, not HRT, is going to solve the complexity that presents in perimenopause. So, for me, one of the things, and you bring up my trip to Europe, one of the things that I think I was experimenting with there and really exploring there. So our trip, my daughter is now in college and she was studying in Finland. So we went there for about 5 days and just hung out with her and did a bunch of touristy things and had a great time. But then we went to France and we just relaxed. We basically did nothing. We stayed in the same Airbnb the whole time. We went on a couple of day trips. We went to the beach a few times, but mostly I got up in the morning. I walked to the farmer's market. I cooked. I slept. I read novels. I was hardly on my computer at all. And I wanted to explore, and I did not at all restrict anything about my diet. I literally ate anything, which is very unusual. For 25 years, I really haven't eaten gluten or dairy. But I just was like, let me just completely relax. I've hardly had any alcohol in 10 years. And I just relaxed. I had a little wine here and there. I ate literally anything I want. I ate cheese every day. I ate gluten every day. And I felt amazing. My HRV completely recovered. In fact, one thing that's very interesting is if I go in the ocean anywhere in the world, my HRV hits its top. So swimming in the ocean, whether I was in France or not, that extra step made a huge difference.
Mm.
And for me, what I learned from that experience is what I've already known, but I wanted to kind of test it. Nothing is as important as our sense of subconscious safety. And I think for women in perimenopause and menopause, we have a really unique opportunity. I was talking about this with my students just earlier today. We are the only generation ever. So I'm Gen X. My mom is kind of mid baby boomer. So, like, if you were born after 1974, you were among the only generation ever where for your entire lifetime, women had money at all,
Yeah.
had our own ability to own property, our own ability to have credit, our own ability to have bank accounts.
Very
My,
different. I always say I stand on the shoulders of my mother
yeah.
because yeah, she didn't, I mean, she definitely has created something, but like this is the generation where if you wanted to have it all, you could
Yeah.
at a cost.
Well, potentially at a physical cost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the physical cost is that we just did all of it, but we just sort of followed patterns rather than stopping for a second. Like, I would say followed patterns of marketing, basically. Like, you've got to be super high achieving, you've got to be thin, you've got to be aggressively exercising, like you've got to be doing all these things. And here's the thing that I think is so challenging about this conversation. We get to do any and all of these things, but almost none of us take even one weekend to slow down for a second and be like, what of this do I actually want to do? Rather than being like, oh my gosh, I saw a podcast where I better get my HRV to 50. Otherwise what?
Other- Yeah, no, I hear you. I finally got it to 50 last week. I think it was because I was in the ocean.
See?
I haven't seen it at 50 in so long.
Yeah. And like, also, who cares? Like, you can have a
Mhm.
super healthy life, you know,
Well, but yeah, yeah, and
no matter what.
yes, and I mean, I was, we live in a time of, of bioobservability, and you've kind of been your own guinea pig in your own any N of one, and I think that in its culture, in a time where women can and are having it all, the career, the home, the family, all the things, the purpose and mission, all that, that I know for me, for a long time, I just wasn't attuned in
Mm.
myself, in my body. And again, for a number of reasons. And so the bioobservability for me reminds me to attune back to myself. And yes, is it a little embarrassing that I need technology to attune to myself? But I was never taught to do that ever
Oh, for
in my
sure.
life.
Yeah, I don't disparage that. I think all of these tools are awesome. And I think the fact that we have access to them is fantastic. And I think sometimes we're so immersed in information that and goal setting, but goals that maybe aren't driven from our actual desires. And I also think those desires can vary widely. I have colleagues who really want to do like super crazy stuff, like things they want to hike, like planes they want to jump out of. And I'm like, go for it. For me, I realize that I am so happy going to the farmer's market every day, cooking food, going to the lavender fields, swimming in the ocean, going to museums, seeing a lot more art in my day, walking a lot, being almost not at all on my phone.
You're like, I just don't work anymore. That's
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to not work, but I'm not quite there yet.
But it is a
But
different way of living when we've been to Europe, we've spent like a month or two in Europe, work trip, mainly because we are entrepreneurs and we're always working, but we would work maybe in the evening to be aligned with
the
US.
time, yeah.
Yeah. But then we would be out all day during the day and walking during the day and being in museums. I was just in Boston. I was recording with Whoop. And I went to the museum and I was walking around and everyone's smoking and it's a lot of energy. It's East Coast energy. It's city energy. And I was like, oh man, my nervous system was like, let's go, let's go, let's go. And I sat there and watched everybody moving quickly and doing their thing. And also, it was a summer vibe. I mean, it's not snowing. Everyone's happy. But I sat and as everything was going around me and moving around me very quickly, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a disparity from my life, where I live. I live in this
Yeah.
funky little teeny beach town in northern San Diego, and everybody is on vacation where I live. That people traveled from all over. They just came from Boston to
Yeah.
come here to do this. And, there's people are on their, beach cruisers and they're in their rollerblades and everyone is here to be on the beach to watch the surfers. And I was like, okay, this Boston energy, I can see how I am attracted to it, but like none of it feels safe to my nervous system. It's very vigilant. I'm like, I'm really having to pay attention to what I'm doing here. Whereas I'm at home, that is not true. Like it's such a
Yeah.
chill vibe, you know?
Yeah. And I think my point is it's not so much that I desire to be on vacation all the time. I do
Right.
desire to be on vacation
Yeah, obviously.
sometimes, which I haven't, as an entrepreneur, I really haven't well enough in a long time. But it's more that idea that we may not need as much as we think we need, or that there's kind of this seasonal flow that we can tap into. I might want to really dive in for 2 months and do a project or focus my attention. And the reality is that most people don't have that luxury
Right.
just because of the economic pressures. But I still think that no matter who you are and kind of where you're stuck, there's a level of intentionality rather than being kind of wrapped up in the shoulds. Because I think we might be having the wrong conversation, especially in perimenopause and menopause and longevity, about like we want to live longer, healthier, but for what? And at what level of attention to our health? Because I am seeing that some women in this time zone are feeling almost like guilty if they don't optimize their own wellness. Like suddenly, everything that we can't control because of the economic pressures of our society, it's our fault if we get sick or we got a concussion or we get cancer or something happens to us. It's our responsibility. Like we just didn't eat right, or we didn't take that time off, or we worked too hard, or we didn't exercise enough, or we exercised too much. And I feel like that conversation is driven by economic pressure more than what women in perimenopause and menopause actually want, which is highly variable.
Very.
And so when we take a moment, and we're like, okay, let's start with what you actually want, where you are in your life, where you are in your health, and then focus on how those two things can align. Because maybe I'll spend a little less time or money on supplements and more time going to an art gallery, going to an art gallery 3 times a month and buying less creatine or whatever.
Not taking the 15 grams a day. No, I
That's
hear
right.
you. When I think about the word perimenopause, the thing that comes up for me is discernment. Is
Yeah.
discernment. Is that if there was a time of opportunity to get clarity about what we love, what we would love more of, and how we want to feel moving forward, this is it. This is
Yeah.
what we get to say, like, okay, I'm actually, I don't love this. I never did. I want to do it different. So yeah, that clarity. Also, as you share, I mean, I think it's important for us to recognize that this is a window of vulnerability.
It
And
is.
that is a beautiful, I mean, it's not fun always, but it's a beautiful opportunity for us to ask ourselves, now that I'm here and I'm working through the messy middle, how would I love the second half to go for me?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I always say this is kind of the only time in life you get to sort of slow down for a minute. I highly suggest hiring a coach. And, unless your guidance counselor in high school was really, really good, you probably have never had this opportunity to lead from your desires, things that are important to you, relationships that are important to you, health that is important to you. It all either was like achieve pressure, based on just either how you were or how the system kind of built you, right? Or you were hustling because you had to, or you were a caregiver. I mean, women are caregivers, and many women want to be caregivers, which is absolutely wonderful. But some women absolutely don't. And there's a very different impact to your health. We have data on this that If you are a caregiver because you want to and you feel good about it, you feel good that it's a good skill set of yours, that you're passionate about it, versus if you're a caregiver because you feel like you were coerced into being as such, the impact to your health is dramatically different, your cardiovascular health. So I think it is such a great opportunity. Sit down with a coach, or just the thing that I think I learned the most in Europe was like just carving out some space where you're just gently noticing your own desires.
I would love to dive into that with you
Yeah.
because I feel like you have made some pivots over the last couple of years, obviously with your health being a big priority of that. And again, being that guinea pig and still really being in that seat. But you guys have moved. You've restructured your business. There's been a lot of aspects of things to help you feel more alive in your body. And then heading to Europe and getting that opportunity, an opportunity that really you haven't really had a chance for a while, and kind of being able to sit with yourself and think to yourself, okay, I still am in the messy middle here. I'm still, constructing what life gets to look like for me and my family. What were did you come up with some love to haves, but also more importantly, some non-negotiables from this insight?
Yeah. We've done a lot of this restructuring because obviously COVID shook up our family, and I needed and wanted to work less. And my youngest daughter was pretty shaken by the whole experience. And so we slowed everything down. We downsized, we restructured financially, we put her in a small school for a year and just slowed down our lives. And that's been so valuable for me because it gave me the space. And I think Europe was an example of that. Like the culture supported it. There's a very different culture in Europe. And I also think you can find it in the United States or wherever you live, because having observed it so deeply for a few weeks, when I came back, I thought, you know what? Right here in Virginia, we have 2 farmers markets a week. I have plenty of places I can walk 16,000 steps a day, and I'm going to keep doing that. Like, I think it just gave me the space to do the things that I knew I already enjoyed and that were really nourishing to my body. And I learned that they were so much less expensive than some of the other things I had been doing. And I don't discount the privilege of being able to do those, though, because some of our other tools are really powerful, but we don't always have that opportunity. So there's actually a lot of benefit from just slowing down the nervous system for a little while. And then so for me, the non-negotiables are sleep, which really have, I mean, you can ask my grad school friends, like they would say that's always been me.
So you've
Sleep.
known from an early age that sleep was a big priority.
Yeah, sleep was always a priority. I was never, even in college, like I was rarely a kid who was going to be like up in the middle of the night. So sleep is a big priority. A lot more walking. I just didn't realize how much I love to just be outside and walking. Even because in Europe, when we were there was an intense heat wave. We were in Provence most of the time. And it was interesting. It was much drier, which was nice for my mast cell activation, and very similar to San Diego, but it was really hot. It was like 97 degrees hot and dry. So we couldn't really walk at all during the day, like in the middle of the day, just for about a week of the trip. But in the morning we'd walk, in the afternoon we'd walk. I mean, we had a car, but we didn't really use it for the city because you just didn't need to. So that walkability, and then I thought, I drive a lot of places here. I don't really have to. If I just give myself a little more time, I have the space to walk. So walking is really important. It also showed me that if I give my nervous system and my body enough rest, then I'm able to go back to, I took about 4 weeks off from strength training or even anything, even Pilates, any kind of resistance training. Going back to it, I felt so much stronger. And it showed me that I think there's a pacing to how we have to take care of our bodies in our 50s that, when I was in my 20s or 30s, I could work out all the time. I mean, I was a kid, I used to work out like 20 hours a week because I was in high level gymnast. But now it might be like 6 weeks of more intense strength training and then maybe take a couple weeks off and just really recover, and also recovering between sessions, which I was already doing because I had some ME/CFS from the COVID. So it took a while to get really back to strength training at all. What else was I going to say about non-negotiables? I think it just can't be argued that, quite frankly, the food is different in Europe. And I'm sad about that, but until I can move there, the United States, we are getting worse, not better, with pollutants and deregulation of polluting industry. And it's a disaster for our health. Our water is getting more and more polluted. Our soil is getting more and more polluted. And it's really sad because it changes the composition of our food. There's just no doubt about it. But, that being said, again, I've always enjoyed, since it's funny because when I was younger, I just didn't really think about food that much. But in the last 20, 30 years, I've enjoyed cooking, I've enjoyed gardening, I've enjoyed farmers markets. I just enjoy food and cooking. And it was fun to really just play with that. But what I learned is I'm not really looking for things that are fancy or complicated or super restrictive or super precise. I just like to enjoy food with people, and I enjoy cooking, and I enjoy the experience of going to the markets and practicing another language. I think that's the other thing. As you get older, you have to play to keep learning and keep developing your brain. Like, no one's going to make you go to school. You don't have to take Spanish 4 or whatever, but you can go to a market and really work on your French, and they'll humble you, but it's good.
Mm, mm. I
Yeah.
love that. So non-negotiable. And you're right. Food is, we have a big rule, but we cook as much as possible just so we
Yeah.
can control as much as possible. But when we decided to buy this place in end of 2020, end of 20, doesn't 2021, we could have bought a bigger house, but 15 minutes or 10 minutes up the road. But we had just come from a place, we were in La Jolla in San Diego, that just wasn't very walkable. It wasn't
Mhm.
walkable to anything. So we were always driving down to La Jolla Village and then walking from there. And I knew I had lived in a walkable area when we lived in Oakland, California. We were right at the lake. And so we walked to yoga in our workout studio. We walked to coffee. We walked to restaurants. We walked to the farmer's market every Saturday. And our life was very walkable, and I loved it. So I knew what it felt like to live in a walkable area that was very, very walkable. I forget what the walking score was there, but basically we just never took the car.
Yeah.
To the point where we left the car on the streets a lot. And if you've ever lived in the Bay Area, there is street sweeping, and I cannot tell you how many tickets we got. So we just would forget. So
Yeah.
that was the one thing about that. So then when we were looking for properties for Kingston, we ended up buying a smaller property that's a block away from the beach, but that it's walkable. It's walkable to the post office, to coffee shops, to everything and everywhere, to the beach, obviously. And it's been a game changer. Like I cannot tell you, I still sometimes reconcile that the house is a little smaller, but I just don't, then I also don't care because it's just so walkable. I've already clocked 10,000 steps. It's noon earlier this morning. And so I just wanted to speak to that as we're having this conversation, I know that many of us are locked where we are, but maybe in this conversation, you're thinking, well, I'm going to be moving once, relocating jobs, or maybe when I'm retiring. And you want to be having these things in the forefront of your mind about what are the things how do I want to live my life, when things begin to shift and change, or when there's an opportunity for me to move or to just kind of live my life a little bit different. I think that's what's helpful about this conversation is what are the non-negotiables that you want to build your life around?
100%. And for us, and I think a lot of women in their 50s, you're really thinking about the whole empty nest thing. 40s and 50s are interesting because now women are having children in their mid 40s, sometimes late 40s. I
We're
know.
looking at kindergarten this year.
Yeah, I know you're one of them. So you're on the other end of not really being an empty nester. But for me, I had Claire when I was like 28, 27, 28 years old. So she's 20, she'll be 22 this year. Kate will be 15. So we basically have 4 years. My kids are 7 years apart, but one of them's almost launched. She's still in college. But in 4 years, basically, we'll be empty nesters. And I've been talking to a lot of friends about this, and it really changes. You have to kind of really shift what you want and, everything from where you want to live to how much space you really need. And it's a really, I think, a very enjoyable conversation because you, of course, still have a relationship with your kids, but it's very different. I mean, Claire's been in Finland for almost 4 months. I've talked to her like 6 times, maybe. They really launch. And it's kind of abrupt when they first go to college. I've been lucky that I have 2 kids. So, we have the other one full on still. I mean, teenagers are not really no
15 years
joke.
old. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Right. You're
Yeah,
still a
she's not
chauffeur.
right. She's not even driving yet, which is also scary that when they start driving, like there's so many things about teenage years that's scary in a good way, but also a scary way.
Scary.
But, they're old enough to really be a part of family decisions. So that's the other thing we have had to do. Like in the last 5 years, when I've been in perimenopause and making this menopause transition, actually, even before that, probably the last 10 years, you're in perimenopause. You have a lot going on physiologically. You have a lot going on in your career, your parenting, but also your decisions aren't exactly your own. I feel like, at least for me, they've always been integrated with at least my, nuclear family, like my husband, my kids, that we all live together. So you also have to deepen your skill set of relationships, of listening, of prioritizing people's desires and needs, creating space for that. Because it isn't even now, I don't think of this as being 100% about my non-negotiables. It's my non-negotiables and my husband's non-negotiables and where they intersect and where they don't. We do a lot of our own things too, but we each have to take responsibility for that and then work on it together. So, and then you take into consideration, what your kids are up to. And it's a very different thing when they go off and do their own thing. So there's a lot of transition that happens here. I think it's just as much as for teenagers. And so I think there's just an honoring that needs to happen, that other people's non-negotiables, whatever they are for you, like they're so valid, even if it doesn't look like that's what your friends are doing or that's what you should be doing. Some people are really sad when their kids go off to college and some people are like really excited. And both are fine.
Both are fine.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It's such a, I always talk to my patients in my community. I feel like so many of us have always taken everyone into consideration. And that this is a time where we're like, okay, maybe what I've been doing leading up to now, like kind of the result of that hasn't been necessarily working the best for me. And then how do I get to prioritize myself? I think in the background, you're always thinking about your family and your partners. And then also like, well, how do I fit into this equation? Like, how do I,
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. I think for some women in particular who really have been deep caregivers or really have been kind of doing what they think they should do, even on a subconscious level, their whole lives, there is a moment to stop for a minute and be like, you know what? I just need a little space to figure out what I actually want and need. Because I think there are a lot of women who have never taken that moment, who've never been offered that moment. And so, yes, there are circumstances where you need to really prioritize yourself for a bit, just so you even know what you want. I'm pretty clear on that now. And so for me, it's more about having a really nourishing conversation with my husband. That's always, it's not like we have this like one day conversation, like, okay, what are we going to do today? We're going to decide like what we're going to do between now and when we're 90, you know?
yeah, no, and I think that's important to note that it's not just, it's never one, especially that,
Yeah.
it's never one conversation figuring out what the second half of your life is going to look like. It's going to be multiple conversations. It's going to be multiple iterations of you, but it's worth, I'm glad you're bringing up that to start having the conversation.
Yeah. And then I do think there are physiologic non-negotiables that vary for all of us, depending on what kind of health, you're listening to this right now. Like, whatever health you're in is different than the health I'm in. And whatever your goals are somewhat different than the goals I have. But there are these foundational principles, just like fiber, phytonutrients, eating lots of vegetables and nutrients, some kind of exercise, enough sleep and recovery, which is where a lot of women don't prioritize. And those little things like your nervous system spikes when you're in the ocean, as does mine, probably something because of the ocean, but also it's just like so nice to swim in the ocean.
It's so nice.
Like what else is just so nice? Like, and for
reading
some
a
people,
book is so
yeah,
nice.
it's so
Talking to a
nice.
friend is so nice. I was with a friend heading to the ocean, and I ran into another friend at the ocean who just moved here, like down the street from me, which I am elated. I always say that, at least for me, I really want to be doing the things that I love with the people that I love. Like when I really think, when I check in with the through line of what matters and what life is all about. Like, yes, I love to be on purpose, but man, I feel like that's just default. Like, I feel like that's just
Yeah.
going to happen. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just going to do that, like intentionally. I want to be doing things with the people that I love. Like, that's what I feel is all about.
Yeah. And I think when we slow down and we decide those little things, like you're allowed to do things just because they feel good, just because they're nice, just because it's fun, just because you like these people. And I think as we know when things feel nice to our nervous system, and so lean into that. It's funny because one of the things we did every day when we were in France, we discovered a bakery that was down and around the corner from our apartment. And, we had to have a croissant, of course, because we're in France. So we tested that. We like had some from this bakery like the first day we're there, and they were amazing. And then we went to a couple other places that were like good, but they weren't as good as this place. So literally for the entire rest of our trip, every single day, unless it was closed, which every Monday was closed, so we'd go to some secondary place. We had a croissant for breakfast and, all the other healthy things. We had fresh fruit and we had eggs and stuff. But it was like my daughter knew exactly how many euro you needed to get 3 croissants and a baguette. And she'd walk down to the little bakery and like we started to know those people. They were helping us with our French. Like it's so simple.
Yeah, you're telling me you weren't putting creatine in your coffee and making sure that you were hitting your 30 plus grams of protein?
And who knows? I have no idea if I hit my many grams of protein. But it was just so nice.
Yeah.
And so what we've done, it's so funny because we came back and I found I happened to was like scrolling through Instagram or something. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, there's a French bakery here in Charlottesville and it's called Coucou Richoux. And I was like, there's no way these are going to be as good, but let's just try it. So Sunday we went there. Well, my husband went and he got 3 croissants and he was like, first of all, he was like, this was $18 or something. Like this would never be in France. It was like 6 times the price, 3 times the price or whatever. And I was like, that doesn't matter, let's just see. And Kate was like blown away. She was like, these are good. She was like, this is almost as good as the other one. So we had this like real, in fact, I'm going to ask them what flour they're using because I've been totally fine eating them, which is really exciting. But we only do it once a week now. We don't do it every single day. But we even tested, like, then we did a little exploration where we got one from like Whole Foods or somewhere, which was okay, but it was not this. And I was like, and what was so fun about this whole experience was it became this like family joy. It was very deliberate and it was like related to what we enjoy, which is like healthy food. But it was just about this like artisan attention to detail and, just this like empowerment that we could make these really empowered and joyful decisions for no other reason than we just like it.
Yes, I love it. I have a mantra that I say as much as possible, but that it feels good to feel good.
Yeah.
Feels good to feel good. That you can just do things because it feels good. You get to have that.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up knowing that. That wasn't what I was taught.
I'm not even sure if I was or wasn't taught that, but I don't think I've practiced it that much, and I do think that as I've gotten older, one of the ways to then continue to relate to your kids once they're teenagers is to really, one of my old bosses told me about this like years ago. She was like, do whatever they are into. Now, I've been in my whole life, I've been an athlete. My husband's an athlete. He still races. He runs a lot in races. Neither of my kids are really athletes. One is a singer and she played a little volleyball, and the other one is like really into theater, musical theater. So they both dance, sing, they're active, but they're not like competitive athletes. And so now, like my daughter, like I know who won the Tony Award last year because my daughter's
You know that
obsessed with that
Hamilton
person.
performed at the Tonys.
Yeah, I saw the Hamilton clip. Like, I know that Tom Francis was robbed. Like, I know all this stuff that I wouldn't have cared about at all, except my daughter is really into musical theater. And what's so fun about all these little vignettes, it's like you might go for an hour and a half and see a Broadway show, but it's a whole different experience if you spend a year getting to know who are the people in the show, what's all the music. We're definitely going to go back to Connecticut to visit some friends next summer because one of our friends is getting married. So I'll probably get tickets to take Kate to a show. And if we start now and just immerse in that, like, what a fun experience. And so I think in the second half of life, it's not to say that work isn't important and purpose isn't important and taking care of our health is not important, but I think it's deeper than that now, in that it really has to be aligned with having these goals and living our lives in the moment.
I love that. Oh, it's so true. Well, and I mean, it is the second half of our lives. I mean, you get real clear real fast that you're like, okay, like,
This is it.
is
Yeah.
this it? Like, is this like, how do I really want this to look? How do I want my relationships to look? How do I want my friendships to look? And how do I want me living life to look? I hear you. When I was in Boston, I was in Boston for just a tiny bit of time, but I love our museums. I love walking. I clocked like 15 to 16,000 steps a day. I never took a car. And I had like a 2-hour window and I walked to the museum. And I was like, this is what I love. This is what I love to do. Yes, I could have been sitting down. I had a webinar deck to lock and load. And don't think I didn't stay up till 11 o'clock that night, but making up for the fact that I didn't do it that afternoon. But the museum wasn't going to be open at 11 o'clock p.m. It was only open till 5 p.m. So that was my window to get and do it. But yeah, I've had so many of those moments where I'm like, even let's say a half hour before my son gets home, and I could either go out and walk outside and listen to a book, or I could unload the dishwasher. Now, the thing that will move me forward in my nighttime routine is going to be unloading that dishwasher. But I mean, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I think, especially for women who feel like they've been kind of doing what everybody else wanted them to do forever and always putting themselves last. Like, the reality is no matter what we do, no matter how perfectly we eat, exercise. And again, I do think those things hold immense value, or I wouldn't spend my life teaching about them. But also, it's not as important as, you just don't know. Like you could get
You just
very
don't know.
sick. You could get very sick at any time.
Yeah.
And I think there's this lovely tension we can play with of working on longevity, making plans for 30 years, and also, as you said, like just being really aware day to day. And that is really kind of about how you craft your life and your schedule. The nice thing is you can do whatever you want, circling back to what we were talking about at the beginning. This is the only generation of women that has had the capacity to literally do whatever we want. And you get to start right now.
Yeah. Ooh, I love it. All right, Jessica, honey, I know we didn't talk about a lot of the things that you are most known for, but I'm so deeply grateful for this conversation. And I feel like there was so much value in us having this, just you sharing your shared experience. But where can we plug in? Let's say we are struggling. We are in the messy middle, and a lot of things are coming up for review, including our health and our health issues. How can we tap into kind of the nuts and bolts of what you bring to the table? And I know mostly you are priming practitioners around the world, not so much women in the community, but a lot of practitioners do listen to this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So our education programs for practitioners are at integrativewomenshealthinstitute.com. I also do see some clients. We have a small practice. You can go to that same website, integrativewomenshealthinstitute.com, and there's a little button that says work with Jessica, or just go to Instagram at Integrative Women's Health and send me a quick message. But yes, our focus is on educating professionals, health and wellness professionals of all stripes all over the world. And if you want to have these deep dive conversations about perimenopause, that's what our perimenopause and menopause course is all about.
Thank you so much, honey. It was such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.